Welcome to today's Tuesday Empowerment Conversation. Today, we're going to kind of pick up where we left off last week, where I talked to you last Tuesday about the I'm sorry habit that so many of us have had or have that we don't even realize, and kind of the history behind it, and getting present and thinking about times you do that, why you do that. Is there some things you need to unlearn? Is there some different language you can use? Something I discovered in that journey of rewiring how I approached the use of I'm sorry in the situations it was actually appropriate in versus not necessary. The other thing that started coming up that I started noticing is how much I would over explain when I'd made a decision about something that I thought maybe I might get some pushback on. I found as an adult, a lot of the times that was in my head based on a lot of conditioning that came from my environment growing up. And sometimes it was there, but also it was okay for me to have an opinion that was different from someone else's if this is how I believed and felt, and if it was healthiest for me, and that I didn't have to justify believing something or wanting to do something or needing something, and base on other people's perception of, or acceptance of that as being right or wrong. So I had this idea about it very specifically, and to the point I jokingly, you guys have heard me if you've been with me a while, or if you're new, I jokingly tell people, not so jokingly, that I am a recovering over-explaining champion of the world. Like, I can over-explain like no other. It's something I'm still working on to this day. I'm much more aware of it. I'm much more cognizant of it. I catch myself much more often, and sometimes I have to pull myself back. And my husband will sometimes nudge me a little bit on the knee if it's starting to go down a road and help me to kind of recalibrate. I think the time that it really got my attention was probably 10 years ago now. And I think my oldest daughter was in college, and I was doing this over explaining based on a decision I'd made or something I wanted to do or something I was expressing to her. And she's like, "Mom, stop. I got it. You don't need to say anymore. You don't need to justify or explain it. I got it. That's what you're going to do." And it was like, oh, wow. This isn't just something that my husband is noticing. My kids that are in college age that are grown-ups now are noticing this too. And so I was like, made me kind of really stop and pause. And then a few years later, as I really started digging into my therapy and started, working on this I'm sorry habit, it really, when you stop and really start intentionally paying attention, I was like, holy cow, I have this inner wiring within me that believes every time I tell somebody something I'm going to do, or a decision I've made, or a choice I've made or not made, I lead with all these details. I would have these long emails. And this is in all the areas of my life. It's like, you didn't need to give so many details. You didn't need to say so many words. You said it. That's what you're going to do moving forward. And I'm like, where does this come from? Because this isn't just from me being a extrovert conversational person. There's something more going on here. And so I started getting really intentional, and again, started going back, to the beginning where I can remember this starting and the environment I was in. And as I've talked to other people, and so many women on my platform here, on the podcast, on the panel show, different conversations we have, book clubs, when I'm speaking and I present this idea in person with people, I am not alone in this. There's a lot of women. I think there's a lot of societal narratives that feed into it, where we feel like we have to justify with people why we want to do something. Especially if it's maybe going to be a conflict with someone else, we're afraid to say no. And if we do say no, because we don't want to disappoint someone, and we've built up in our minds, I have this preconceived expectation that we have to justify it, that it's not enough for it to just be, this is just not right for me right now, or this is right for me later, or this is what I need to do, or this is what I feel like today. And so If you struggle with this, if you find yourself over explaining, justifying your decisions, creating lengthy excuses when setting boundaries, or just simply feeling guilty when you say no, my challenge this week, and I'm going to talk to you about what I've learned, is to dig into that a little bit. So we're going to dive into this very common habit. It's very common amongst people pleasers. It's common amongst highly empathetic individuals. It's common amongst people in very codependent relationships where they feel like they're responsible for the happiness and wholeness of the whole group, and instead of the responsibility is just for themselves. And so if they're going to do something where some in the group might like or feel comfortable or want them to do, they feel like they've got to justify it. I used to feel like as a kid that I had to like get people on my side. Like, I'm going to convince them, even if they disagree, that this is the right thing for me to do. I had very much, they're going to disagree or they're going to agree. I'm going to win or I'm going to lose. And I'm going to lose if I don't convince people to be on my side. It was very much. And so when I got older and started getting into adult relationships and even people, people in workspaces were like, we need this memo to be a little less wordy, or we need this explanation. This doesn't need so much detail. Just tell them this and leave it at that. Appreciate all the context, but it's not necessary in this situation. And I realized how baked into all of my habits it was, not just in my relationships, in my personal life. And started realizing that at a very early age, not just in my home spaces, but in the faith spaces I was in, and I was in very patriarchal faith spaces. I was in a very patriarchal system in my home. There was not a lot of room for children's emotions or questions when it was something that was uncomfortable, when they were having trouble handling their own emotions, or there's like, this is the right way to do it, and that's just the way we do it, and that's why. They really didn't have another explanation other than they were doing what they were told, and so you were supposed to just do what you were told. And so if you had a disagreement or a question about it, there wasn't room for that. And so it comes kind of this training ground that if I did have an opinion, or if I did have something to say, or I was trying to be heard, that I was just going to explain it to pieces until they had to listen and they had to agree with me. And if they didn't, then I hadn't explained it well enough, and that I must not have a good enough reason for wanting to do it. Or I must not have a good enough reason for having this opinion. I mean, there was so much wrapped up in it. And so this really bled into my life. I think we get this a lot as women. I think we get this a lot as girls, of spaces being defined certain ways. And if we show up differently than how that space is defined, we feel like we have to over-explain it, rather than like, this is who I am. This is what's healthy for me. This is what's necessary. This is how I show up. This is what I feel like doing, and leaving it at that. Or when we're asked to do something, no, I can't do that. Why? Well, I don't have space. It's not aligned with my values. I don't want to do it. I have other things planned that day. No. And we get this idea in our heads that the Earth's going to go off its axis if we don't, over-explain and make people understand, so to speak. And when the truth of the matter is, not everybody's going to understand all the time. But if it's healthiest for you, that's enough. But we, in this idea, in this very patriarchal, misogynistic environment in so many of our cultures and spaces as women. But I also will tell you, it's true for any child who grew up in a space where they did not feel free to express emotion. They did not feel free to express their opinions. They did not feel free to be heard or be curious about things that were maybe uncomfortable for their parents. So this is not just something that shows up in women. Women are set up more for it, I believe, and in my experience, because of all of the misogyny and patriarchy that still exists. But it exists amongst many different types of people. Anybody who hasn't felt secure in their voice, or that it was safe to express without a lot of explanation. And so I want to mention that too. And so I think that we carry this into our daily lives, and there's this people pleasing where you don't want to disappoint anyone. We don't want to fail. We don't have a sense of boundaries because we believe we're responsible for everybody else's happiness, wellness, all those things. And so, like everything else that I talk about here, it comes back to you knowing your worth, knowing your value, and knowing that you have a right to choose the things that align with who you are and what's healthy for you, and the things that don't. And it doesn't require an explanation or justification to do that. We don't have to shrink to make others comfortable. We don't have to abandon ourselves. And if we disappoint someone, then we, we can don't have to. That doesn't necessarily mean we've done anything wrong. That just may mean they're used to us showing up in a certain way, or maybe that's going to create some responsibility for them that they haven't had before for themselves, because we've been enabling them in that relationship, because we've been the codependent one who has showed up and taken on everyone else's happiness and security and comfort as our responsibility. So when we start showing up differently, you may get some pushback. That doesn't mean, just like with healthy boundaries and communicating expectations, these all go hand in hand. The over-explaining shows up so many times when we're trying to express a boundary that we need for ourselves. We're trying to say no to something. We're trying to communicate an expectation, but we're worried about how other people are going to feel about it. And we feel like we talk ourselves into this idea that if I just keep saying words, at some point they'll come around and they'll agree with me too. And then I won't have to feel bad instead of being able to, like, this is honoring to me. I know my value. I know what fills my cup. I know who I am as a person. These roles, these labels don't identify who I am. They're not my identity. They're pieces and parts of my story, but they don't identify who I am. I'm foundationally grounded in who I am as a person, not who as a human being, not a human doing. I'm firmly grounded in what I value and what is healthy for me and what is not. And I know within that, sometimes that's going to get some pushback, especially from people that maybe haven't had the opportunity or chosen to do that work themselves, or are not used to me showing up that way and don't want things to change. That dynamic is uncomfortable for them, and they're not comfortable exploring why. And so it's just goes back to that doing that work, that embracing your layers, those pieces and parts of your story, that the parts that make you cringe and the parts that you love, unpacking those things, processing those emotions, getting curious rather than judgmental of why every time you go to grandma's house, you feel like you've got to explain this relationship or explain this job choice or explain this house you bought or didn't buy, or relationship you did or didn't say yes or no to. Going back to, like, grandma, I love you. I chose this as it's healthiest for me. I'm not asking for you to agree with it. That's your choice what you do, but I hope that you'll be able to support and love me in spite of us disagreeing on the decisions. And at the end of the day, that's up to you to decide that, but I got to choose what's healthiest for me. And that's it. That's done. The conversation's done. We move forward. We're not spending the next half hour trying to justify or explain or get her to agree with you. That's not the point. The point is to show up. And when at the end of the day, these are not, so many times I feel so selfish. These are not, when we show up as our healthy, whole, authentic selves, living into our truth, living into what our values are, living into who we are as people, that allows us to show up fulfilled, filled, resourced, present. Then everyone around us is getting the healthiest version, and we're going to draw those people to us that want what's healthiest for us. And the people that are more concerned about their own comfort than your health and well-being may pull back a little. That's okay. Sometimes we have to love people from afar, but we have to get to a point where we know we don't have to abandon ourselves or live like we're an inconvenience or shrink ourselves. And that's when we can feel comfortable in that. And it takes time. I will tell you, it took me, much like the I'm sorry habit, took me about 1.5 years. It took me about 1.5 years to stop feeling guilty about the choices I made and the urge to try to over-explain them. The urge to try to pick up the phone and, like, maybe they'll understand now why I made this choice. It's been 6 months. It's been 1 year. It's been a while. Maybe now they can get that, instead of, like, they know where you are. If they have a question, if they're curious, if they want to really understand, they can pick up the phone and call you too. And being settled with that and being content with that. But it takes very intentional time and very intentional work. And this is what I created the FEEL framework out of, these questions that help you come home to yourself, that help you to release yourself from that feeling of needing to be responsible and care for everyone else's happiness, that feeling and responsibility for never disappointing anyone. And getting down to like, my value is not based on whether I disappoint someone or not. My value is based on the fact that I was created. I was created uniquely. There's things about me that no one else in the world carries. I have my own values. I have things that light me up, and that's my purpose. And that's how I'm going to show up in the world. And trust that at the end of the day, I can trust myself. My inner knowing will tell me when things are out of alignment or not. And the people that are healthy for me and want what's healthy for me will be drawn to me, and I'll be drawn to them. But it takes accountability. It takes choosing that for yourself and being willing to make choices and owning the fact that some people might not understand. But there's also a great freedom that comes from realizing I don't have to justify everything that I do with an over explanation of trying to get people to understand. Some people are going to, some people are not. I can say no, period. And if they have a follow-up question, it's like, this doesn't work on my schedule right now. Doesn't align with my calendar right now. Doesn't align with my values. Thank you so much. Not going to be able to do that. That's it. But again, so if you feel, and like I said, it takes time. It takes us time to unlearn these things that are so ingrained within us that we don't, that we do them automatically. It takes time to stop and be present. So much like I talked about last week, getting that accountability partner, having a journal to kind of track where does this show up in me? What relationships does it show up? What are the dynamics of this relationship that might be provoking me to feel like I need to do this? And what are the choices I can make within that to make that shift? That work on myself and that staying steadfast when I get pushback of not feeling compelled. And guess what? You're going to slip up. I still find myself over explaining at times in situations. That's why I have my husband there to nudge me, or I even will pull back later. I'm like, oof, that was a situation I need to be aware of moving forward, where this kind of seems to show up in me. And I understand that because it triggered this in me. And I know that comes from this. So it creates a lot of presence, a lot of curiosity, but it can be done. And so I wanted to share this with you today because I think that it's so important that we stay tuned with ourselves to make sure we're honoring ourselves in the way we live and honoring our relationships and trusting our intuition and stopping to check in with ourselves from time to time. Is this asking me to live within what's honoring and healthy for me, for my family? And so, yeah, I think I'm trying to think of a succinct way to wrap this up, but I just know I see it all the time. I see it in myself. I see it in so many other people. And when it came together so closely with me with the I'm sorry piece, I knew that like, these are connected. These are connected. Like we tend to, we over-explain instead of apologizing. And an over-explanation is kind of like an undefined apology in a way, if we feel like we've got to do that to try to bring people around. And so showing up unapologetic with a kind but firm no period, or a succinct that doesn't work on my schedule right now. Yeah, we're talking 1 to 2 sentences. And then if they keep pushing back, it's like, I'm going to ask you to respect that at this time. I'm aware of what my bandwidth is. And so this choice is honoring that. And I hope you can understand. And then that's the end of it. But again, practice takes time. If you need practice, if you need help, you need support, go to embracinglayers.com. Let's get together. I've got many resources through my different online courses or one-on-one empowerment sessions where we can work on this together, and we can create practice scenarios, and we can create weekly trackings and accountability practices that can help you get in tune with this, because I know how freeing it is when you're able to realize and be aware and really know when the right time is to explain something and when it's time to pull back and really measure, what is provoking me to do this? Is this necessary here? Does this need more details? Or is this me just trying to justify and me feeling not safe or free to give this answer here? And being really honest with ourselves about that. So your ways to engage this week: the next time you say no to something, leave it at that. Reflect on what you would have said when over explaining and why you maybe would have said that. Is there something going on deeper internally? Are there layers that still need to be embraced or uncovered into the root of that? Write down and journal the emotions that come up for you when you're in those spaces and places and in those conversations with certain people. And at the end of the day, the key takeaway is you do not owe anyone an explanation other than yes or no. This isn't in my bandwidth. This is not, I'm not available for this right now. Your yes matters and your no matters. And when they're aligned and trusting yourself within that, that's what you need to do. And that's okay. Healthy boundaries create healthier relationships, stronger self-trust, and greater emotional freedom. So I hope you found this helpful. I hoped it helped you to stop and consider and think about some spaces and places you might be doing this in, and help you to be a little more intentional. And again, reach out to me if you need more support on this. I'm happy to be of help to you. We've got great resources available. But at the end of the day, remember, you are valuable, you are worthy, and you get to choose. Take good care of yourselves. And I'll see you next time here on the Feel Podcast.